Hi guys, Zasmo here, and today I have for you a path of building guide. In this video I'm going to go over importing and exporting builds. I'm gonna go through basically every single section in path of building, many different tools and options that you have that can help you optimize your build. Gonna basically teach you everything I know about path of building, so it might be a pretty long video, but I'm gonna very comprehensively explain all of the different functions of PoB, and this should be very educational. So let's start with importing and exporting builds. So there are multiple ways of doing this. First of all, on the top left you have the import export build, and you have a few options. Number one, you can import from an account. So you can use your own account if you want to just share your own build. So you just type your name of an account. Many streamers, like basically unless someone is running like 5 ways and trying to hide their tech, or like delving and trying to hide their tech because they're trying to be competitive, people will have their accounts set to public. So you can basically type the name of an account of any streamer you like. Basically you just need to find out their account, which usually is going to be public if they have the extension on Twitch, and then you just click on start. You select the league, and then you can just pick any character you want, and then you import the passive tree and jewels and items and skills, and that gives you basically everything. You get the complete build, everything they're using, all of the skills, all of the gems. It tells you where they're socketed in, all of the items. You have a full look at everything. So you can do this with somebody else's account or your own account. Once you have a build in here, let's say you want to share a build with a friend. If this is, let's say, your build or somebody's build that you want someone to take a look at, you can click on the build sharing generate, and then you can pick a PoB, POE Ninja, or Pastebin. I use PoB because it's has the least failure rate. On Pastebin sometimes you get like rate limited because it thinks like people are sharing too many links. So I use the PoB. You click on share, and that generates a shorter link, and then that link can be used by anybody to import this into path of building by basically going to this import build, and you can simply right click and import, and it's gonna import this exact build that you just shared. There is also another way of importing this from, for example, POE Ninja. So if you go on POE Ninja, let's say you want to go to builds, and you want to look at, let's say, lightning arrow, whoever has the highest DPS, and you want to see, okay, what is this person using? Why is this number on their DPS so high? You basically click on this. This copies the code for path of building. Then you go back to path of building. You right click in here in the import section, right? Or just copy paste it, but if you can just right click, it's quicker. Then you click on import, and you have their build, right? So you have everything here, including the skill gems, jewels, all of their skills, all of their items, and some basic configuration, which might not be correct, and there might be some things that are actually not applied for real in game. Many accounts, many builds that are on top of PoE Ninja are not really functional builds. So the config might not be correct as well, but this is how you can see how the character is basically constructed. So that's how you import and export builds. Now let's grab an example build, and I'm gonna go basically through everything, how we can look at the build, how we can use all of these different sections. So I'm gonna grab just any of, let's say, this one. So this is my Galvanic Arrow Miner Slayer. It doesn't really matter what the build is, but I'm gonna teach you everything about this window and everything that you can see here. So first of all, on top we have name of the build, save as. You got the number of passives. This is 123 is maximum number of passives if you are at level 100. This is the ascendancy points. Manual thing is refers to the level, so you can either set the level to 100 yourself, or you can make it automatically. Like as you assign points, the level is gonna change. So if it's automatic, you can see as I remove the points, the required level changes, right? So as I'm assigning points, automatically the level increases. So you can leave it at automatic, or you can set it to whatever you like. Here you can pick the class and ascendancy, and let's start from the left side. So we have main skill is gonna be here what's selected, and for example, Galvanic Arrow has 2 components. It has the arrow that hits, and then it has the cone, right? So it has 2 hits. Each of them does the same damage basically. So as I switch, this number doesn't change because they are basically the same number. It does basically double the damage, and if you want to see what would be the total damage if you hit both with the cone and with the arrow, then you can go to total DPS. So you go to skills, you go to your main skill like Galvanic Arrow, and then you click on include in full DPS, and that's gonna show it here. And here you can set the count. So this is 1 hit from this skill, and as you can see, this is equal to this, right? So 1 hit from this skill is this amount, is 17 million. And if we hit it with both projectile and the cone, I can just simply do count 2. If I'm hitting with both parts of the skill, then the damage is basically doubled, and that way I can see the full DPS without having to keep it in mind and so on, right? So this is just the basic hit of whatever you have selected here, and here you can have full DPS, which will include things like Calling Strike, which will include things like damage over time. So for example, if you have some little ignite on it or big ignite, if you have like ballistas, you can separately set, for example, another skill. Let's say you have ballistas, and you can set to how many ballistas you have. If it's all hitting at the same time, then that's going to give you the full DPS. So this is where you can see full DPS and everything that's included in it. And this is basically how you add things to full DPS, right? If it deals damage, let's say Bear Trap, right? I click on this and it's gonna include the Bear Trap DPS, which is like 900,000, but yeah. So that's how you can basically include things in full DPS and see how much damage you're dealing. Here are very important things, especially for if you care about crit, if you care about hit, if you're doing attacks, right? So here we got average damage, so this is damage per hit. Attack rate, that's going to be basically attack speed, so how many times you are attacking per second. That's what this tells you, right? Or casting per second, right? So it's going to be cast rate, attack rate. In my case, I'm throwing mines, so this is how many mines I'm throwing per second, and this is mine throwing time, so how many, like how long does it take me to throw the mine, how long is the animation. There we got the crit chance and crit multiplier and hit chance. Important thing to know is that if you don't have 100% hit chance, it will also show you effective crit chance, because imagine that I have 100% chance to crit, but I have only 99% chance to hit, right? Because I don't have enough accuracy. That would mean that the effective crit chance would actually be only 99%, right? Because only 99% of my attacks would crit, because 1% of them would actually just miss. So that's a thing that would appear here if I didn't have enough accuracy. Then we got hit DPS, ignite DPS. So depending on which part of it you want to scale or which part of it you're interested in, you can see what's more important here. And that way, for example, you can see if you're doing mostly damage over time. So if you have like dot DPS, right? If you have, let's say your ignite DPS was higher than your hit DPS, then you, for example, don't care about things like penetration, right? Because penetration is not applied to damage over time, but it is applied to hits. So that can help you understand a little bit of a breakdown of your damage. You got Calling Strike, you got AOE Radius. You can see these things also in much more detail in the calculations. So if I go to calculation, you can see the AOE Radius 39, but it doesn't really tell you that much. Like, what is 39? What does that really mean? If you go to calculations, you select the galvanic arrow here or whatever skill you're using. Let's say I'm looking at the cone. Let's say I select the same, like maximum amount of mines. We can go to different skill specific stats, and this will tell me, for example, the mana cost, the projectile count, and one of these is going to be radius, right? So this is showing you like a little graphic as well that can help you illustrate, like help you kind of imagine in game how big that would be, right? And it gives you a lot of useful stats. For example, you have next breakpoint, right? So radius and AOE basically works in a way that you need to get enough AOE multiplier, because it multiplies the area, and if you increase the area enough, then it's going to increase in the radius by 1. It goes in steps, right? So you cannot increase it just like an analog way. It's kind of like in a digital way, right? So it's basically one at a time. It's in discrete increments. So in order to increase this my AOE by 1 radius, I need to get 5% more increased AOE or a 4% more multiplier. That basically says that if I get 4% increased AOE, that does nothing for me, absolutely at all, right? So if I get like a corruption on a gem that says 4% increased AOE, it actually does literally nothing for my build. I need to get at least 5% in order for the AOE to increase. So that's how you can figure out your breakpoint for the radius for increasing the AOE of your skill, and it's very, very useful. And there's a ton of other information which I'm gonna go over later, but first let's continue with this. So we got the mana cost. This is also very important because you can figure out your mana cost and mana cost per second, and then you can see how much mana you're regenerating per second. So as you can see, I am spending 27 mana per second, but I am regenerating 41 mana per second. So that means I can sustain my mana cost and the build will work. But if you have this number, mana cost per second, higher than the mana regen, then you're in trouble, right? You need to be leeching, or you need to have some other way of regaining mana, like a flask, in order to sustain casting your stuff. Then we got strength, dex, intelligence. If you don't have enough of either one of them, then it will also show you the requirement. And you can see in the configuration here with the attributes what gives you the specific requirements, right? So I have, for example, strength requirements here, and I can see that the thing that requires the most is determination. So level 20 determination requires 155 strength, and that's how I can see what do I actually need, right? Like you can see that, for example, for dexterity, I only need 185. So I could cut some dexterity if I wanted to, and I would be totally fine, and I can see exactly how much of each attribute I need here. This is in the calcs tab. So let's go back to here. Then we've got effective hit pool, physical max hit, elemental max hit, chaos max hit. So these things depend a lot on how you have things configured, right? If you are configuring it for the pinnacle boss, so if you go to the configuration, this is a tab that I'm going to explain, but I'm kind of like jumping back and forth because these things are all tied together, and it's easier if you understand them, because this can drastically change if I just set it to normal monsters, right? You can see, oh, I have 75k hit pool, but if I change it to like uber boss, then I got half of that nearly, right? So there's a big difference depending on how you configure your POB, and that basically means what encounters are you simulating, right? So are you simulating uber boss fight, or are you simulating standard boss or a pinnacle boss? The standard usually is that people want to select the uber pinnacle boss because that's what matters. That's where your DPS matters. Maps are usually pretty easy, but bosses is what's difficult, but you can set this to whatever you need. So that's the effective hit pool, phys max hit, chaos max hit, and so on. You can also see this in calculations. You have this for damage taken, and this will show you all the different calculations. So you can hover over this, and let's say you got damage taken, effective damage taken, maximum hit taken. So if you look at, for example, physical hit, right? So you can see maximum hit, how is it calculated? It will explain to you. It will tell you like what is mitigating this and so on, right? So this is a very, very useful tab as well. If you want to understand a little bit how to make your character tanky, you should basically hover over these things and see, okay, this is reducing the damage by this much, right? I got 10% reduced damage taken if I'm leeching, so that's making me more tanky against all damage pretty much, right? You can see all these different things that affect your character in terms of the defense. So let's move on to the next thing, which is going to be life. So you got a life, increased life. This basically tells you how many increased life nodes you took, right? So these are the increased life. That's basically what this tells you. And this is the total amount that your character will have. This tells you a life regen, and this is life leech or on hit rate. So if you have leech, or if you have a life gain on hit, this will basically take you how much you are. This will basically tell you how much you are healing, right? And this will be counteracted by, for example, degeneration from something like blood rage. So if you want to run blood rage, or you want to run righteous fire, and you want to figure out how much you need, this is going to be the section that you're looking at. And then we got total mana from tree, unreserved mana. This will tell you basically how much mana you have unreserved, so you can figure out your auras, right? So you can go to your aura skills and figure out, let's say, if you can get away with having like a lower enlighten or something like that. So if I lower my enlighten to level 3, we can see that this gives me only 31 mana, and then it gives me a warning: you do not have enough mana to use conductivity and flame dash, for example, right? So I wouldn't have enough mana to use all my skills, and also I wouldn't have enough mana to reserve all of the mines, which this doesn't even tell me, but I know that from experience. But that's how you can figure out how much mana you're gonna have, and you can just change these things and see if you have different enlighten, if you have different reservation, how much mana you would have. Energy shield, basically you have the exact same thing as for life here. Then you got evasion rating, which tells you roughly your evade chance based on the config that you have. Your armor, same thing, tells you physical mitigation based on the hit that you have in the config, which is here. And you can change that. You can change the physical hit to something bigger, and you can just manually type how big the hit would be, and then this number of like physical damage mitigation will be lowered, so you can manually be changing that as well, right? It will depend also on the config that you have set up. Then we have spell suppression chance. So this is important. For example, a lot of people very, very commonly think they have 100 suppression, but they don't. That's because of this node, Revenge of the Hunted. It gives you 10% chance to suppress spell damage while on full life, and when people check it in their hideout, they're on full life, and it gives them 10% more, but they actually have 90% spell suppression. So this will give you the accurate number, unless you select something like you're always on full life. So this should be somewhere in the config here. There should be an option of like you are always on full life, and that will give you basically the extra 10% spell suppression. And then we've got the resistances. This gives you how much you're overcapped as well, your movement speed based on the config. So I'm using here a Mage Blood, but if I didn't have the Quicksilver Flask equipped at all, this will show much lower, right? But I don't even need to have to turn it on because I have the Mage Blood here. But if you have the flask turned on or off, this will change that. And then we have the full DPS. So that's basically like a quick look at the calculations for your character, all the basic stats of your character. That's how you can very quickly glance at what are the attributes of your character, like what is the DPS, what are the resistances, what is the effective HP, what is the recovery, how is the mana cost, crit, accuracy. All of those things are here in like a very quick, easy way to look. And in more details, they are in the Calcs tab. The Calcs tab is very, very useful for a lot of different things. For example, one of the things that is very useful is Trinity, right? If you want to use Trinity support, it requires that you're dealing a similar amount of, let's say, 2 damage from 2 elements. So let's say like cold and lightning, right? And this way you can see this, right? You can see how much damage you're dealing. So you have like average hit, what's going to be the damage roll for lightning, for cold, for fire, right? I'm fully converted to lightning, so these are just like a little bit of added damage. But if I had like a split half and half, like half lightning and half cold, I would be able to see exactly how much damage I'm dealing, what is the range of the damage, and how much does it overlap, right? If it overlaps a lot, then it's good for using Trinity, and I can support that, so you can very, very easily see that. It will tell you basically how much are you dealing percentage-wise as well, right? So you can see like how much of total damage is dealt from that element. So portion of total damage, 99% here it says, right? So 99% of my damage is lightning, and that way I can see very clearly, okay, I need to just reduce enemy lightning res, I need to have lightning penetration. All of that is gonna scale my damage very, very well because I'm doing almost all of the damage from the lightning element, right? And that way you can confirm like what kind of damage you're dealing, and therefore inform yourself better on how to build the rest of your character. So this is basically, this section is for the skill damage, and then you have different attributes of this skill, right? So you have like crits. This gives you like, for example, breakdown for like crit multiplier, and it shows you when you hover where all of that crit multiplier comes from. So let's say you copied someone's build and you see, okay, they got 650 crit multi. Where are they getting that, right? Let's say you want to build a character that has high crit, and you got crit multi, and you copied the character, but you only are like 300 crit multi. Where are they getting all of this crit multi? You can basically go to here, hover over the crit multi, and you can see where does it come from, right? And you can see all of these things broken down, and where are they getting all of these attributes. Same thing with like accuracy, right? Where is this guy getting all of this accuracy, right? He's got 4,000 accuracy. How does he get all of this accuracy? Here you can see the base, so the flat amounts, where it comes from. You can see different passives, different items, and you can also see the increases to the accuracy, right? And then this shows you the chance to hit. Here we've got leech and everything related to that. You got stuff related to ailments. You got stuff related to ignite separately if you have like bleed and stuff like that. Here you're gonna have things that are specific for the skill. So that's gonna be like mana cost, projectiles, AOE. It's gonna be also things like duration, right? So those are very, very important skills to look at. Here we got calling strike, item rarity as well. Many different things you can look at. And here you have different attributes of your character. This is very useful and very important when you're trying to, for example, cap your ailment immunities, right? You can see other avoidance, and here you can see shock avoid chance, freeze avoid chance, chill, ignite, sap, brittle scourge, poison, blind. So you can see I have chances to avoid all of these elemental ailments, and you can see where it comes from, right? So it's basically coming from it comes from boots, a jewel, and then a storm shroud takes care of the rest, right? So that's how you can see that. What else? You can see your stun duration, so stun and block. You can see also exposure effects. So if you have, for example, reduced effect of exposure, reduced effect of curses on you. So I have reduced effect of curses on me by it's minus 53. Okay, because I have consecrated ground on. So basically curses are doing absolutely nothing to me. But even without the Consecrated Ground, I have 103% reduced effect of curses on me. So curses are basically doing nothing to me. You have a spell suppression effects, so how much of the damage it actually is reducing. Tons of different things. Like let's say you're seeing someone have like a lot of armor, and like, okay, how are they getting their armor? You can go to the calculations tab, check the armor, and here you can see base from the items. Here you can see base from other sources, so from Molten Shell, from Determination, from Flasks. Here you can see the increases from the tree they have, the total increases that they have everywhere else, if they have any more multipliers, and here it gives you the total amount and physical damage reduction. Same thing with life, you can see where they have all their life come from, where they have the resistance coming from, where they have the attributes coming from. Everything is listed here in detail, right? So this is very, very useful because people very often will ask like, okay, how are you getting all of this stuff, right? Like how do you get this much armor? How do you get this much evasion, right? You can very easily import somebody's POB and just look at this and see where the evasion is coming from exactly, like every single thing broken down. You don't need to ask anybody, you can just see it all for yourself. So this is a very, very useful tab for like analyzing characters in many different ways. So now let's go to the skill tree. Let's talk about the functions of the skill tree. So there is a lot of useful things here that you can do that PoB will basically help you to make your own character much better, right? So let's say you want to figure out an anoint, okay? And you want to figure out, okay, which node on the skill tree, like anywhere on the skill tree, would give me the most damage. How do you do that? First of all, you need to make sure that you have your damage set up correctly. So either you have your skill picked here, or you have the full DPS assigned correctly, right? So once you set up the full DPS, so you go to your skill, you get your main skill, you include it in full DPS, you set it all correctly so that you see the full DPS of your actual skill. Now you can go to the tree and you go to show node power and you select full DPS, right? When you select the full DPS, PoB is gonna calculate over all the different possibilities, right, and every single node and what it does in order to figure out which one would increase this number by the most, right? It's gonna figure out every single node and how much does it affect this number. So this is gonna take a while. If you like Alt Tab, this is actually gonna stop, so you're gonna have to do it again, right? So this takes like a few seconds, but once you figure that out, you can click on, for example, show power report, and then you can sort by DPS, right? So full DPS will tell you basically individual nodes, and per point will tell you which nodes you should actually pass to, because it's gonna be per point the biggest increase for you. So if we look at full DPS, that's what you wanna figure out. Like if you wanna figure out an anoint, this is what you wanna look at. So savagery, that's basically the +1 to frenzy charges. So this is telling me +1 to frenzy charges is gonna give you the most damage. And when you hover over this, on the very bottom, you can see this is like 2.8 million DPS, which is 8% damage increase roughly, and per point, if I were to pass toward it, that would be only 1.4%. As you build your characters, you're gonna notice that you're gonna kind of understand just from experience like how much per point is good, how much is bad, right? So if you look at this, this shows me like 3.2 per point. Generally anything above 3% and above is decent, is pretty good. 3% is good. Anything below 3%, you want to look for something better, right? So if you have like an option, well, let's scroll down somewhere, Stormweaver, and let's say I wanted to go here, this shows 0.6 per point, right? So this is not good, and usually also before you allocate the node, the number is higher than after you allocate it, right? So I can show you here, this shows me 4.5, but before I allocate it is 4.7, right? That's basically how the math of this works out, because you have a lower number that you're multiplying, so you're gonna have so the increase is gonna be bigger before the number is higher. Anyway, Overshock gives me 4.7% increased damage, and this is only 1 point here, right? But you can see this cluster jewel 1.7, but I need these jewels, right? So you can see like every single combo of these things. Like let's say you want to see how much this cluster gives you, right? If you hover over this node, this is gonna tell you it's 2% per point, right? But the thing to take into account is that it's not just the numbers, but also there is lots of utility here that you might want, right? So you always have to balance the pure damage versus utility. You wanna figure out, okay, first you pick up all of the utility that you need, like things that are necessary, right? Like for example, mines cannot be damaged. I definitely want that. Things like mine detonation speed for my build, it's actually pretty useful. The penetration, it's awesome. The generation of power charges, that's also very, very good, right? So you get all of the utility that you need, and then you figure out, okay, what's gonna give me the actual best damage increase per point, right? This, for example, gives me 3 per point. This gives me 2.3 per point. This gives me 3.9 per point, right? This is a pretty good, very underused combo. If you're using marks, Mark the Prey is a huge multiplier because it gives you marked enemy takes 10% increased damage, which is basically multiplying the damage that you're dealing to it. So that's a really cool underused node, and you can find these things out very easily if you just use the POB. And you can see things are lighting up in red, and the brighter they are, the more damage it's gonna give you, right? At this point, this character is decently optimized, so it's not gonna be like some crazy stuff that we're gonna discover. But if you don't have stuff picked up, let's say, I don't know, let's say crit multi or something, right? This would, if I did the recalculation again, these things would light up and show that this is actually gonna give me decent damage, right? 2.7 per point. And then also the masteries. The masteries, you have to manually check them, but when you hover over them, you can see, for example, increased effect of auras from mines. This gives me 8% damage, right? So that's a massive amount of damage. And there is also, each mine applies increased damage. That's also huge, right? So there is multiple strong effects on the masteries. When you hover over them, it basically tells you the exact number. Okay, what else do we have? If you want to find out, for example, cluster jewels, which cluster jewels you should get, you can simply select show cluster jewels, and that's going to give you the different notables that you can find on cluster jewels, and you can basically sort it full DPS, and you're going to know, okay, eye to eye is going to give me the highest increase. I think this is something with curses or something, or this is a calling strike or something like that. Things like that often show up, and you're gonna basically have to look at them and skip some of them and look at them manually, right? So guerrilla tactics, this is from medium cluster jewels for traps. This is a very nice node. It gives basically, I think, crit multi and penetration. So this is a very, very node. So if you wanted to add something to this build, you would add like medium clusters with guerrilla tactics, and then you can look further for something else that comes from these. You got shrieking bolts, you got hounds mark, so different things here that you can look at, that basically this can show you what will give you the most damage. So that's very, very useful. You can do the same thing if you want to check for your, for example, defense, right? If you want to do only if you want to increase your bleed DPS, ignite DPS, if you want to increase your life regen, you can find out all of those things. So like what would give you the most life regen, for example, you can select that, and it's gonna be probably one of those nodes. Like it's gonna be either like hearty, or it's gonna be something like not sovereignty. There is this new region node somewhere here. Yeah, somewhere here there's like a new region node. This one, I think. Surge of Vigor. Yeah, this one gives a bunch of region as well. So that's how you can use this function. What else do we have? For the trees, you can also use multiple trees, right? So you can basically do manage trees. You can copy this, name it something. Okay, and then you can go to it, and then you can edit it separately, and then when you swap to the default one or whatever one was the other one, you still have this saved. So that way you can, for example, create leveling trees for yourself on the same config of everything else. So now let's move on to the skills and talk about the skills and how to find out which skill gems you should be using, especially if you want like the maximum damage, right? Because PoB will tell you what will give you maximum damage, or what will give you whatever you can pick here, right? Effective hit pool or whatever, but it won't tell you what's actually the best, right? Because this really depends, right? So there's one interesting thing with this build that is a good example for this. If I select full DPS, we got sort gems by DPS. So this basically means that I'm gonna click here, and it's gonna automatically suggest whatever is the highest DPS increase for me, right? So let's say I'm gonna remove trap and mine damage, okay? And then we're gonna see what is it gonna suggest. And we have a default gem quality 20. Let's say I want all awakened and non-awakened gems, doesn't matter. And then all the different quality variants, that's gonna give me the divergent and phantasmal and all of the different qualities. So I'm gonna click on this. It's gonna calculate, because it's gonna take a little bit longer because of the alternate quality gems, but then it's gonna show me probably barrage. Yep, it's gonna show barrage. But the truth is, barrage actually is not the highest damage, because of the way that this character is constructed, right? So the way my character is constructed is that it uses forbidden jewels and it uses a crucible tree that makes the skills repeat. However, these things are not calculated in PoB correctly, so I am using a custom config which gives an approximate amount of damage. Basically, Forbidden Flesh and Flame gives like a 160% more damage, and the Crucible mod gives about 100% more damage. So together that's about 260. I don't have these. I have like specifically unselected the Forbidden Flesh jewel here, so it doesn't give me this fake multiplier from this. So because I have this config selected here, Barrage is showing up as doing the most damage, right? However, if I didn't have this more damage multiplier, right, the barrage would actually be great, right? If I didn't use these different text that I'm using, if I didn't use these repeats, right? But because of how repeats work with barrage, this is a specific case where it's actually not suggesting the right thing. So you have to pay attention, and you have to pay close attention. A very common example as well is, for example, elemental focus, right? So elemental focus, as you can see, is showing huge damage increase, right? But what it's not accounting for is that you're losing shock. So if I don't have any other source of shock, this is gonna basically make it so that I'm not shocking anymore, and therefore my damage is actually lower, right? Conk effect, that's also not accounting for the fact that maybe you don't want your AoE to be smaller, right? Maybe you actually want your AoE to be bigger so that you have bigger coverage and better clear, which is the case with me. So that leaves the next skill, which is Trap and Mine Damage, which is exactly what I was using. So that's why you have to pay attention to these things as well. But this is gonna basically suggest for you what is the thing that gives you the most damage in terms of the support gems, right? But you might want to have to like set some kind of a base. So for example, I'm picking charged mines because I want frenzy charges, right? I know that frenzy charges and mine throwing speed is going to be great for me, so I'm going to select this at first. I'm going to select this because there is also, which one? No, the penetration. This one gives me exposure, right? And I have some things that are conditional on exposure. So that's why I want this, like for sure. And I'm gonna like pick these things at first, and then see what are the other suggestions, and then consider that. So you always want to use this as a suggestion, not as a thing that you should use for sure, because you could like brick your build and make it actually deal less damage, even though PoB will tell you that you're doing more damage. So you have to be careful with that and really try to understand what these skill gems are doing. For example, another skill gem that this might tell you is the best is going to be something like cruelty, right? So for damage over time builds, cruelty is very often suggested because it's like a 40% multiplier, but it's only a 40% multiplier if in game you're actually hitting hard enough to get the 40% buff. If you're not, then cruelty is not going to be as strong, but it assumes that you can hit that hard, but it cannot calculate that on its own. So this is another thing that you have to pay attention. Another cool function of this, when you have this full DPS selected and so on, you have your skill selected here, it's going to suggest you different things that can help your build. So if I, for example, let's say I remove Bear Trap from here, right? And I'm going to click on new, just completely new skill, and it's going to suggest a skill that would increase my full DPS just if I added that skill, and it's gonna suggest probably Bear Trap, right? Let's see. I'm clicking on new. Berserk. Okay, Berserk is an amazing skill if you can actually generate the rage. We are not generating the rage, so this will not work for my character, so it would be fake damage. However, Bear Trap is the next suggestion, right? So Bear Trap is going to be what increases my damage. You can see different alternate qualities, but all of them give me 14.3 damage, so you can just use the regular quality, right? So Bear Trap is increasing the damage, and you can just keep going, and it's gonna show you different auras. Like for example, if you want to know which aura would give you the most damage, clearly Anomalous Wrath would be the most damage here from all of the auras that I could use. Next would be the Divergent Herald of Thunder, next would be the Herald of Purity, and so on. And you just go down the list and you use as many of them as you want. So that way you can figure out which auras you should be using, which curses you should be using, for example, right? So if I didn't have the conductivity or assassin's mark here, that would be another suggestion that this would give me. So that's how you can figure out what skills you want to be using. And then another important thing is also this option, which tells you where the skill should be socketed in. Because if I don't socket this in my weapon, I'm going to lose damage, right? If I socket this somewhere else, you can see I'm losing damage because this weapon has things like, for example, socketed gems have extra conversion, right? Like socketed gems are supported by a level 10 Fist to Lightning, so that gives me extra damage. So this is an important thing to do as well, especially if you're using things like Empower, +2 levels, anything like that. So where this is socketed is important. And here you can also enable, disable the skills, and you can call them whatever you want. So that's how you basically use these gem sections. Then we go to the item section. So item sections is very, very useful, and there's a lot of underutilized tools here that you might want to take advantage of. So first of them I'm going to show you is the uniques. So a lot of the time you might want to be in the early stages of trying to make a build, and you're thinking, okay, what kind of a unique would be good for this? And you might go on POE wiki, or you might go on POEDB and try to look at all of the different builds. Let's say you want to make an ignite build, so you just type ignite and look at all of the uniques that have some modifiers that give you ignite damage. But that might not be all, and you might not be able to do all the math in your head. But what you can do is you can select, for example, sort by full DPS instead of sort by name, and this will give you all of the uniques in the game basically as they are, just raw. If you just equip them instead of the item that you have in that slot, what would be the change in your DPS? So this will show you basically all uniques, and you can select per you can select, for example, per different slot, right? So you can see Perseverance here would give me like 17% damage because I have a good amount of armor and evasion, so this gives me a bunch of attack damage. Here you have Oxium, which would give me some extra damage. It's increased elemental damage per power charge because I have a bunch of power charge. You get Unnatural Instinct, and it's gonna show you in which slot you would have to socket that in order for it to give you damage. So you have a ton of different options, right? And each of them is gonna show you how much damage it gives you. If I'm interested, for example, in, let's say I want to know Amulet, which Amulet would give me the most damage, we just select an Amulet and we see Maryland's Fallacy would actually increase my damage by 1% compared to the Amulet that I'm using. However, my Amulet is giving me a ton of accuracy, which is required, and also a mind throwing speed, which is adding to the comfort of the build, and it's giving me a bunch of life and stuff. So I wouldn't make that swap, but it shows you all the different options that you have. So that's a very, very useful function. You can also, of course, create an item. So if I want to make just any basic item, I can make it here. So you can craft an item, and let's say I want to craft let's say gloves. Okay, so let's type gloves. We can select, let's say, armor evasion base. Okay, and then you can select whatever is the specific base. Let's say dragon scale gauntlets. And then you can craft the gloves. So let's say you wanted on gloves some life, right? So you can select maximum life. You can pick whatever tier you want. You can select this here. Then you can select whatever suffixes you want. So this is what is naturally available on these gloves. So let's say you want to do fire res. Okay, and then you can add different modifiers from here. So here you can add modifiers from crafting bench, so whatever you can craft. So let's say you want +1 to projectile skill jumps. Okay, so projectiles, this is going to give you +1 to projectile skill jumps. So this allows you to put on this craft on these gloves. You can also add modifiers, for example, from essences, right? So you can look at different essences and see what are they all giving, and you can type whatever you want. So let's say if you want damage over time, right? So it's going to be damage over time. You got Essence of Delirium, for example, right? This is a cool essence for like ignite skills or poison skills, which gives you 30% more damage over time for the socketed gem. This is often used, for example, in a cold dot build, any build that has like a secondary damage skill that cannot be socketed in the chest, can be socketed in, for example, gloves, where you're gonna give it like +1 to AOE skill gems, for example, from this craft, or from Unveil you can give it +2, and then you can use the essence for the 30% more multiplier, right? So you can select all of those things. You can add, you can basically even edit it, right? You can have any item here. Instead of fire, if I type cold, right, and I save this, it changed it to cold, right? It basically uses plain English for a lot of these things that you can do yourself. There are also, let me find like a good example. So there are also different modifiers that have, let me use a different craft. Let me show you an example. Okay, so let's say you've got like armor or something, right? And you want to make this armor higher, but let's say this was gloves that you copied from somewhere. So you can click on edit, and you can see this armor here, and this shows you the range, right? The range is this range, this number is basically a percentage of the roll. So if I type 1 here, that's going to be the maximum roll. Right? If I delete this, if I type 1, that's going to be 75 armor. As you can see, 75 armor, right? So if you didn't have this option to manually change it, because this was like an item that you copied from the game, you can basically press Ctrl+C in game, and then you can go to create custom, and then you can just Ctrl+V and paste the item here, and you will create an item, right? And then you can edit it basically just as I edited this text. And you can basically play with this and figure out how to make all the specific items and all of those specific changes. So you can craft items, you can create custom items, you can use all of these unique items. What else can you do? You can also look for items on trade. So this is an extremely useful function. This will help you, especially with things that you are very flexible on, like for example, jewels, right? Jewels or quivers, or like something that you don't really care about as much, you just want this item to give you as much damage as possible. You can very easily do that. So if you click on the trade for items, and then let's say I want to figure out I want to get a quiver, okay? I just want to buy a quiver. I don't need any more resistances. I don't need any more life. I don't need anything specific. I just want pure damage from the quiver, right? So you're going to have to first configure this little section. You're going to have to copy your POE SSID from the website. You can Google how to do that very easily. You just get it from the website. Don't share this with anybody because they'll be able to use your account. So this is something that you copy in here, and that way Path of Building will be able to use the trade website, right, for you. And then you can adjust the weights as well. Let's say we don't care about effective hit pool. I just want the damage. So we only care about the damage. So we only care about full DPS. And then let's say we go to weapon 2. That's going to be the quiver slot. Find best. We can select the price limit. Let's say you're looking for something that is for maximum 2 divines. Okay, let's say you have 2 divines on a quiver. That's how much you want to spend, no more. And then you can also include the corrupted mods or influences if you want, or if you don't want them. Let's say you don't want a corrupted item, then you would unselect that, right? Because let's say you want to put a specific craft on it or something. So then basically you execute this. It's going to calculate the weight mods, and then it's going to show you the item suggestions. But you can basically click to go to back to search, and then click on this link, and that will open it in the browser. Then you can click on the sum, which is the sum of the different weights of these modifiers that it automatically picked for you. You click on the sum, and that shows you what is the highest damage, right? So this one with the highest sum is going to give you the highest amount of damage in PoB. So this is the quiver that I would buy if I wanted to get as much damage as possible. So now I'm going to click on copy here, copy item. If I want to see how it will actually look like on my character, then I go back to PoB. We go to create custom. I paste it, create an item, add to the build, and then we go to the quiver, select this other quiver. I can see, okay, this is adding 13% damage, right? So I can increase my damage by 13% if I just buy that cheap quiver right now, right? So as you can see, the character can be made better. However, I would lose a lot of life and a lot of resistances, right? Because that's what my quiver does for me. But you can see how easy it is to just find upgrades for your character using this tool. So this is a super useful, underutilized tool as well. Okay, what else do we have? We went over the calculations, config. Okay, config is the last important thing I think that we are gonna go over. So config allows you to see what is your true damage going to be in any given scenario. So let's say we want to configure this. Let's say I'm gonna unselect all of these things and I'm just gonna make it from scratch. Okay, and we're gonna make it so that we can kind of accurately tell how much damage we're dealing, right? So as you can see right now, it shows 13 million DPS, which is not accurate at all. I'm gonna leave this because this is specific for the build. It has to be there. So let's say you wanna configure your damage for a boss. You wanna know, okay, how much DPS am I gonna have fighting like a Searing Exarch or Eater of Worlds, right? So you're gonna select here, is the enemy a boss, right? You're gonna select Guardian or Pinnacle boss, right? This is, for example, Eater, Searing Exarch, Shaper, all of that stuff. So you're gonna select this. This is enemy level. This is gonna automatically fill in their attributes, right? Their stats, how much damage they're dealing on average, what are their resistances, and so on. Then we are gonna look from the left side. So here we got resistance penalty. This is basically for leveling, which bandits you picked, which pantheons you picked. So let's say I pick Lunaris and I pick, let's say, this one, the Aberrath. I think this is what I have on my character. And then we're gonna go select if we're using power charges or frenzy charges. Do I have ways of generating them on a boss? Yes, I do, because simply detonating a mine for me that is targeting an enemy is generating power and frenzy charges. So I select both of those. I don't have a way of generating endurance charges. What else is here that applies? Am I leeching? Yes, I'm a slayer. I'm always leeching. Some of these things are always going to be turned on by default. So for example, this thing is automatically turned on. It automatically assumes that I'm leeching, so I don't need to click it, but we can click it if I just want. Do I have flask active? Automatically assumes it because I have mage blood and I have all of them clicked on. Am I on consecrated ground? We're gonna assume the consecrated ground as well. Same for the enemy, which is gonna give a lot of damage from the bottled faith. Am I chilled? Number of nearby enemies, let's say 1 nearby enemy. Have I killed recently? Nope. Because first of all, I'm using mines, so I am never killing unless it will be from a dot. And secondly, if we're doing a boss, then we don't kill recently, right? Have I been hit recently? Have I detonated mines? Yep, let's say I detonate in the last 4 seconds. Let's say I detonated 10 mines. And then have I killed rare or unique enemy recently? Nope. Then we are, if you're using a brand, we're using 1 brand. What else can we do? Is the enemy burning or ignited? Yep, because we have some fire damage. Is he shocked? Yep, we select the shocked. Is he exposed to lightning? Do we have a source of exposed? Yep, we have it coming from a support gem. And that's basically it, right? And we're back to where we were in terms of the damage. So these are all the things that you want to look at if you are configuring it. If you want to see how much damage are you going to have while mapping, then you just do no boss, right? And that's going to be naturally always more damage than if you're fighting a boss. However, for my build, it's actually a very, very small difference because we have a lot of these things the same for a boss as well as not for a boss. So that's how you configure this stuff. You can type any random shit in here, by the way. You can type, for example, let's say you're trying to make a PoB, and you want to see how your effective HP will look like, but you don't want to fill all of these items with resistances and match that, right? You can just basically type plus 1000% to all elemental resistances, okay? And now you can see it gave me plus 1000 to all resistances. If you want to delete it, you can just delete it, or you can just do slash before that, and then this line does not count, right? So that's how you can, for example, just makeshift, put something in your character. Let's say you don't want to work on your accuracy yet. You can just do plus 1000 accuracy, right? Or like plus 1000 critical strike multiplier, okay? And now it's gonna give you insane damage, right? So if you want to see how much damage would you have if you added 100 crit multi versus how much damage would you have if you added something else, you can very easily type those things and compare them here. So this is like this is basically just custom modifier window that allows you to do that. And that's basically it. I think I went over everything. We went over the calcs tab, item, skills, config, tree, and all of that. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. The link to the download for the PoB is going to be in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.